of the troops had been trained to go into battle on the green rolling hills of Europe. They arrived to find a scorched, barren desert like this one. It was a place few of them had ever imagined they'd have to fight over. The sand clogged their engines, it got in their food, and no one was even sure it was stable enough to take the weight of the big American combat vehicles. But the biggest problem by far was making sure the Western troops did not offend their Muslim hosts. Even apparently innocent behavior, like female American troops wearing short sleeves, could cause huge offense in a country where women are expected to cover up completely. Troops were issued with instructions on how to behave appropriately in a devout Muslim country. US Army chaplains were even renamed morale officers so as not to cause offense, but it remained a fragile coexistence. An Iraqi attack on Saudi Arabia remained a constant fear for the coalition. But it was the stories about the actions of Saddam's army inside Kuwait that outraged world opinion. They brought a reign of terror to Kuwait, including summary executions in the street. Saddam's men were looting shops, houses, and factories across the city. Torture and punishment beatings became commonplace as the Iraqis tried to crush any sign of Kuwaiti resistance. Some resistance fighters were even shot dead in front of their own families as a warning to everybody else not to get involved. Western civilians living in Kuwait and Iraq had been rounded up and taken to Baghdad as hostages. Saddam appeared with some of them on television in a clumsy attempt to show that they were being treated well.
You're British, all of
the moment, yes.
Stuart and Halib. Does Stuart get his milk?
Yes, he does.
Meanwhile, his grip on Kuwait was tightening. Saddam Hussein had turned Kuwait into a defensive fortress. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqi troops were in and around Kuwait. Many of them dug in down here on its southern border. They'd built very heavily defended positions with great sand ramparts close to the frontier with Saudi Arabia. Behind them was a second line of defense with thousands of troops. And then about 100 miles further back, just inside Iraq, were Saddam's elite troops, the Republican Guards, waiting in reserve. By November 1990, world leaders had run out of patience with Saddam. Although he hadn't attacked Saudi Arabia, he showed no signs of withdrawing from Kuwait. So the UN Security Council passed a new resolution that changed the coalition's mission dramatically.
12 votes in favor, 2 votes against, 1 abstention.
No longer would the coalition just defend Saudi Arabia. If Saddam's troops had not withdrawn from Kuwait in 6 weeks, the coalition would attack and force the Iraqis out. The countdown to war had begun. For the US military, it was a daunting prospect. They were haunted by the memories of the United States' last major conflict and knew that they could not afford to make the same mistakes again.
If one American soldier has to go into battle, that soldier will have enough force behind him to win and then get out as soon as possible. This will not be another Vietnam.
But Saddam was determined that that was exactly what it would be. He calculated that if the Americans attacked, his best hope was to inflict massive casualties on the US troops. Saddam believed that after the Vietnam War, it was not something the US public would tolerate. And in 1990, he had the weapons to cause thousands of casualties in seconds.
Just 2 years earlier, in March 1988, the Iraqi army had attacked a Kurdish village in northern Iraq, using a mixture of mustard gas and the nerve agent sarin. 5,000 people were killed, and thousands more suffered terrible injuries. Throughout the coalition, every soldier lived in fear of an Iraqi chemical attack. Day after day, they practiced the drills that would save their lives if nerve gas was used against them. To understand more about what this meant to the coalition troops, I joined a British Army training exercise. My job was to help unload equipment until the instructor launched a gas attack drill. Gas, gas, gas! Gas, gas, gas!
9 seconds, come on. Think about the drills. Okay, let's go, well done.
If a soldier couldn't get their mask on this quickly in a real attack, the gas could be lethal.
Come on, 2 minutes, let's go.
I then had to carry on with my task, exactly like the troops would in a combat situation.
Come on, work hard, well done.
Come on, really gotta get through.
Come on, come on.
Down this side, down this side. But gas masks make it impossible to breathe properly, as I was finding out.
Excellent, good, well done, well done. I can't actually speak. I'm not getting enough air in here.
2 minutes.
Come on, well done, well done. That one there. That one. Down this side, let's go. Excellent, good, well done.
Stop! Stand still. Unmask. Come on, that's good. Good, well done.
There's just no air in there at all. And the idea of fighting something like a battle under those conditions is absolutely unimaginable, and that's a lot harder than what I was just doing there, those shuttle runs. The idea of spending hours on hours in this get-up, charging across hills, is extraordinary.
But in 1991, soldiers feared they really would have to fight while under chemical attack. Some of them were already suffering heat exhaustion just from wearing gas masks in training. Schwarzkopf knew that if it came to war, the greatest threat to his troops was Iraq's chemical weapons. And he also knew he would have to minimize American and coalition casualties. The key would be to keep his ground troops out of the battle for as long as possible.
Giora.